kind of feel like you and I are identical twins in a specific way. You know, this weird profile of things that we do with the curating and the hosting and the talking on the radio and, you know, and then the touring. So I guess I'm going to ask you the question that many people ask me, which is like, why? Because most people think you play the bass really well. So why all these, like, where does it come from for you to do all these different things?
Well, first of all, let me say what an honor it is to be sitting here with you. But where does all of this come from? The short answer is, I don't know. My focus throughout my career has been trying to play the bass as well as I possibly can. And then just all of a sudden, all this other stuff started popping up. But I think it's because we had this discussion before. We're both very curious.
Yeah.
I like to learn as much about as many different styles of music as possible. And in doing that, you meet a lot of people. And you meet a lot of people, you make a lot of friends, you make a lot of contacts, and you start having a presence in all of these different sorts of musical circles. So I guess that's kind of where it started to happen.
Yeah, I think we're also both very curious, and then as soon as we know something, we want other people to know it too, because
That's
it's
right.
like so exciting, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's where it comes from for me. Is there any kind of a model? I was trying to think what kind of a model there is, you know, for this presence that you've carved out specifically in the jazz world. I was thinking about Dr. Billy Taylor, for sure. I guess Mary McPartland a bit, but that was a bit different. But is there anyone that you look to as?
You just named two people who were very important to me. I was in 8th grade when I met Dr. Taylor for the first time. And at that time, there was no more respected a spokesperson for this music. And so Billy Taylor coming to Philadelphia, you know, everybody was just like, you know, sweep the floors, wash the windows, you know, make sure everything's straight. Dr. Taylor's coming. And he came to Philly quite often, and I got to spend a lot of time with him. And there's a direct relationship with Dr. Taylor here at the Jazz Museum in Harlem. My first paycheck as co-director of the Jazz Museum in Harlem came straight from Billy Taylor's checkbook, because we had been working here for about 8 months trying to get the museum built. You know, we were going around the neighborhood and talking to people about doing, you know, collaborations and partnerships and things like that. And we had our first board meeting, and Dr. Taylor said, "How much have you guys been paid?" I said, "We haven't been paid yet." And Dr. "What? No, that's not going to do." And Dr. Taylor pulled his checkbook out. So, yes, he was a great mentor for a lot of reasons. My career in radio got started accidentally because of Mary McPartland. I was a guest on her show Piano Jazz many times, not always as the featured guest, but as an accompanist to whoever she would have on the show numerous times. And her last season, her health was starting to fail, and she couldn't make it through the entire season. And so she says, "Christian, you know, I think you could do this. Why don't you be my stand-in host?" And so I got to be the host of Piano Jazz for the second half of her final season.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. This radio thing, you know, I don't know if I've told you this, but when they called me to do my hosting gig that I do, and it was very much out of left field, and they said, you know, is this something you would ever think about? And before my brain knew what my mouth was saying, I said, well, sure, because when I grow up, I want to be Leonard Bernstein. Because for me, that's the model of, you know, how you harness this medium.
That's right.
For its maximum potential of education and like growth. And it's just like, there are so many people out there who we never see in the concert hall. So for me, that's magic. And to be able to tell these stories and share this music to the person I call the accidental listener.
Right.
It's very exciting.
And thank goodness for YouTube, because, you know, I read about Leonard Bernstein's television series for many years, and, you know, but could never see it. So a lot of those episodes are now up on YouTube. Yeah. It's fascinating to see.
It's fascinating. And you know, the funny thing, I have a relationship with a project uptown that works with young kids. And whenever that was, a few years ago when it was the Bernstein Centennial, I was doing a project with them. And I played for them some of the young people's concerts, old, grainy, black and white footage. These little kids were so into it.
Yeah.
They got his excitement and his humor. And at one point, he's kind of getting mad at somebody, and they loved that so much. And I thought, this stuff, regardless of the sort of dated look of it, and even his diction and all that, it translates because of just the joy.
Yes, the excitement.
The music.
Yes.
Yeah. Something you said made me realize something too. For both of us, we were very well trained in our instruments. And then I remember so well when I first started playing, and there were things that I was asked to do. They were called like an outreach, and all of a sudden you're in some school gym with all these kids sitting on the floor and some broken piano, and you don't know what to do because no one ever taught you. So for me, because I don't like to do things badly, I learned how to do those things. And the same with, when I first started thinking about writing or doing some sort of podcasting. And I think for us, we've been playing these instruments a long time, and we're secure in our information base.
Right.
And so it's also kind of a personality trait to learn to do something well when you got to do it.
Absolutely. And I feel that, I'm sure it was like this for you, but I always tell younger musicians, because nobody wants to do a bad job. Everybody wants to be the best they could be whenever they're in the position where they have to produce. And, I tell younger musicians that I believe failure is a necessity, because, we're such a slogan culture. And I remember seeing a T-shirt that said, "Failure is not an option." And I remember thinking, well, I kind of feel the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Failure is necessary.
Yeah.
When you go up there, when you play a concert or whatever situation you're in and you fail miserably, I mean, like, obviously you can fail for not preparing, but then you can just do the best job that you intend on doing. You do all that you can, and you still don't, it doesn't turn out the way you hope it will. Now you're learning something.
Exactly. Every time.
And so, I mean, I feel like every situation I've been in as an artistic director, as a bassist, as a band leader, whatever it is, I feel like I've tripped enough that I think I have a good grasp on what I'm doing now.
Yeah. That brings me to something that I'm kind of jealous about. Whenever I talk to you or any of your colleagues in the jazz world, and you guys are mostly guys, you're always talking about my brother, my big brother, my little brother. There's that mentorship. That's who extended a hand. And it also includes it's the sibling thing. There's rivalry too.
Big time.
Yeah, but it's something that I don't, experience in my realm over there. But tell me about who are your brothers?
I think because of what jazz is, we have to play in a group.
Yeah.
It's something that you can try to do it by yourself, but you need to play with other people. Mm-hmm. And so therefore there's a community already built in.
Yeah.
I went to a performing arts high school in Philly where my classmates were the late, great Joey DeFrancesco, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Questlove and Black Thought from The Roots, Boys to Men. And so we were all, you would say it was competition, but when you would come to school every day, and this is where I know I'm just plain old fortunate, I would come to school, I go to high school every day, and there's somebody out in the hallway practicing some aria. You go to the 5th floor and there'd be some dancers in the hallway going over some routine. So everywhere you looked in our high school, there was someone doing something incredible. Mm-hmm. And so you had no options to get lazy, none.
Yeah.
And so even with that, I think the first person I met who was really important to me, that really sort of brought things into focus for me in many ways, was Wynton. I met Wynton Marsalis just before my 15th birthday, and he was already a household name by 1987. And I had never seen anybody who was so serious. So here's a 26-year-old who's a pop icon, who's quoting Ralph Ellison and Albert Murray and Stanley Crouch wearing a suit, playing, these classical pieces and playing jazz and being successful at it. Yeah. Very well spoken and educated. But when you got to know him, you saw the street side of him because, he's from New Orleans. And so he was quite an overpowering person to meet at age 14 and turning into 15. And his group was playing at the Academy of Music. And he said, hey, man, come by. So I went, just enjoying the concert. And then he comes off stage, he leans down, he's like, I'm sitting in the wings. He says, what you want to play? No. What? I say, what you want to play? I said, what are you talking about? What do I want to play? You're not going to ask me to. He's like, come on, hurry up. I got to go back. Like, J Mood? All right, bet. He goes back and they finish the song and I see Robert Hurst putting his bass down. I'm going, oh, what's about to happen? And, he gets on the microphone and he's like, ladies and gentlemen, I met this kid at this master class a couple of days ago. And, I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about him. Please welcome Christian McBride to the stage. I was so scared. And like Joey DeFrancesco was like, go, So I went out and I sat in and, I just had icicles coming off my hands and my feet. But from that moment on, it kind of snowballed. I then met Branford, and when I met Branford, he was like, hey, Wynton told me about you. And then I met Terrence Blanchard and Donald Harrison. They was like, oh, Wynton and Branford told us about you. Yeah. So like that whole community, that buzz, which is still, even in the age of social media, that community buzz, that's still the most important thing. Because you can hear somebody on social media be, oh yeah, they can play. But at least with me, I get on the phone with people who I trust. Like, hey, tell me a little bit about such and such. Oh yeah, they can play, but they're a little,
Right, there's more than the playing.
Oh man, listen.
Yeah. You don't want to find yourself on a tour bus with just anybody.
Look at here.
Right?
That can be a disaster.
Yeah. It's funny that you talk about Wynton and, his moving around so comfortably among genres. Back to Dr. Taylor, I think he coined the phrase, I think he was the one who was sort of promoting this idea about jazz being America's classical music,
that's right?
Which, I wonder what you think about that now. I think I understand what it meant then. And now I think I'm so committed to this idea of just, beyond category, let's stop with the genres altogether. But the use of those categories makes more sense than most about anything else. But I don't know we haven't talked about that, how you feel about that.
I feel like categories were created to sell the music. And the whole idea of selling music, that's always been a real difficult conversation to have, to trace back to when recordings were first made, or even, piano rolls.
Right.
Those were the records, of the 1800s, and early 1900s. So like when records first started coming around, like I guess the people who created this whole record business, you had to do it by category. We surely don't want white people buying black records because they're going to like them too much. So then they came up with the phrase race records. They were actually called race records,
I've seen old jukeboxes, that have that as a category.
Yeah, right. So I think you and I are most likely very much on the same page about like just doing away with the whole notion of genre. But I also believe in, if you have it, use it to your advantage. And coming up in a school system, or even in a culture, American culture, classical music was always like, okay, if you actually know anything about classical music, you have class.
I know.
You're elegant. You have sophistication. And if you study classical music, you are really, really a well-trained musician.
Yeah, like embroidery.
Yes, that's right.
No,
but if you play blues, jazz, pop, all of that, that's beneath the culture, right? And so then when you have somebody like Dr. Billy Taylor or the late great John Lewis, or even somebody like Oliver Nelson or Mary Lou Williams or Hazel Scott, who eventually had to go to Paris to become a big star, said this is all that stuff we call classical music. Those are all European composers.
Yeah.
What about the great composers we have here, like Ellington?
Right.
Right. He's our Beethoven.
Yeah.
So then when Dr. Taylor and Max Roach and all of these people really went to bat for music called jazz, and you flip it into being America's classical music, now that makes people think differently, you know?
Yeah, no, I know that was very much a threat at the time. And I think, honestly, it's kind of the other side of the coin. To say that jazz is America's classical music is kind of the other side of the coin of like Antonin Dvorak saying the classical music that you make here needs to be informed by Black traditions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So really, in the end, what everyone's saying is beyond category, I think.
Right.
If you drill down.
Yeah, the reason, I was going to say, even no matter what you call it, we're still struggling to sell tickets.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So whether you call it jazz, America's classical music, whatever you want to call it, we are still trying to get the layperson to think of something that's not pop music in a more exciting light. Yeah. So I think that we're all fighting. Yes, we are all fighting for the arts, for whatever corner of that that we belong to. I also think that it's a time when we are trying, each of us in our own sphere of influence, to make some change in this country that has a lot of problems, right? And you, in advocating for this music, which really is a manifestation of democracy and freedom and progress in our history, you are doing that by default every day. But I don't know if you think about that in sort of a macro sense. Are you also like a change maker, a fighter for justice and truth, or are you just trying to sell tickets? Yeah, I don't know if I've ever consciously thought of anything I'm doing along those lines. I do realize that I'm doing that to an extent if I actually do stop to think about it. Number one, because we are a product of our history, and there have been a lot of great people and a lot of great things, a lot of profound things, good and bad, that have made us who we are. And so as a musician, when I try to put together these groups, I'm trying to put together forces of good, forces of positivity to make people change the way they think, or at least to consider another way of thinking, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that was a trick question, because you obviously are.
I don't know about obviously.
You are such a connector.
Some people might hear me play and be like, "Oh yeah, it was cool," and then go home and do what they were doing.
I think honestly, I have this joke that you know everyone, but you kind of do know everyone, and I don't think that's just because you're a friendly guy. I think there is this desire to connect people across generations, across traditions. I see you playing with all kinds of musicians. You don't care. It's the curiosity, and and connecting people to this music, to this history. And I do think, what I say to young people when I work with them is like, believe that you are changing the world every day.
Yeah.
Because you are, in some little tiny way you are. And then if we look back, I really do wonder. I know that Bernstein said all these quotable things, but I don't know if he really believed that he was making such a huge change as we now see that he did.
Right.
And Ellington too.
Right.
And all these guys. Right. So I declare that you are.
Well, I declare the same about you, my friend.
Okay, that's fair.